Sure.
For the last few retail releases, we have included point counterpoint within the release.
I love this. Yeah.
And so we did a 13-year-old Lechig, which I want to say was sherried.
Yeah, the younger of the two was sherried,
right?
And then the 15
next
was
to
the bourbon.
15-year-old Lechig, which was ex-bourbon, and so people could put those side by side. And in the release before that, we did a 8-year-old Clinlish.
That sounds right.
Was it 8? So the younger Clinlish was in bourbon, and we did a 23-year-old Clinlish in sherry.
Talking about going into the 30-year-old Aultmore,
Mm-hmm.
I would venture to say the Clinlish is darker.
It is, yeah,
Even
hair darker, yeah.
The Clinlish is second fill Oloroso sherry, and the Aultmore is first fill.
There you go, right?
Which, when I saw the color of that, I was actually kind of relieved. As we were talking about earlier, like you do first fill on a 30-year-old. Right. That can get a little scary sometimes, and maybe there's no Aultmore left by the time 30 years are done. So
so I'm actually gonna leave some of the 8-year-old in glass so that we can do some of the point counterpoint.
Oh, beautiful!
If you feel so inclined,
I can do the same.
The Aultmore 1989 is actually one that I have a bottle of, but I'm finishing up my sample of.
So was this from when you do these point counterpoint things? Yeah, I'm getting there. Do you tend to get them from the same broker, or is it sometimes different? Or
that's a good question.
Yeah.
Do we? I guess in these 3 instances, yes. Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily going forward, but that's how it's worked
exactly.
out so far.
Yeah. I wouldn't put that in stone, but yeah, it is. Yeah, it just happens to have been pairs, and pairs. Hey, you don't see that a lot either.
Oh my god!
Interesting. Thank you for that question. You gave me a chance to reflect.
Nice, sure.
I like that. But yeah, there's a little bit of bourbon and there's a little bit of sherry.
Yeah. And this is one, we both had the same reaction, I think, once we stuck our noses in it, even though we know what's coming. It's just, oh, good Lord. That's like...
Yeah, it's so funny. There's now this world, and it's solely at the feet of Jim Murray. Jim Murray has made it clear that farty sherry will not be tolerated. Right? and we're now
say farty. Whoever is not sure if that was just a misunderstanding from the Scottish accent. Farty sherry.
Yeah. Did he say the 4 and the 0? Is that what he said?
40? 40
no, Mildred. He said farty.
He did say farty. Yeah.
And
so you're talking about sulfur.
Yeah. Right. And so it's really interesting because if you take older sherry and you talk about the sulfur candles that were used to stop mold from growing inside, sherry butts in transport, there's a difference between a struck match in the next room and a struck match in a bucket of urine, right? Right?
There sure is, Jason.
Right? You can tell I grew up in pubs in Scotland.
There's a difference between someone farting in the room next door and farting right next to you.
100%. I tell my wife that all the time. All the time. I did it next door like you told me to.
This could have been so much worse.
So
we digress.
But what's become a little troubling is now you've got people at tastings who just want to shout out farty or sulfur. Like it's the beginning, middle, and end of the entire conversation. And so, when I stick my nose in it, do I get sulfur? Yes, I do. Do I get sulfur to the point where it's obnoxious? No. Do I get it where it fits within the context of a 1989 sherry butt that had lived some life before that? Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's kind of now, and I do love this global world we inhabit. It's now crystal clear that Germans love farty sherry whiskies. They love them. And so, when you stick your nose in this and you think, okay, we brought this to America. Why did we bring this to America? It always comes back to education. Always. We thought there was a statement to be made, a story for this whiskey to tell that is going to challenge people, right? We know some people are going to say farty and run out the room. We know other people are going to say, I'm getting a bit of sulfur, but I'm also getting the woodiness and I'm getting some Aultmore. And boy, this has sat in cask for a while. Like, if you really want to engage it, this is a great example of old sherried Speyside whiskey. And there are people falling over themselves to gain access to this style of old sherried Speyside whiskey.
Oh yeah, and it's something. I mean, those flavors in particular. I mean, one, there's something that happens at that like 25 to 30 mark where kind of different flavors come in that you don't necessarily see any other way. There's no way to like kind of fake a lot of those. And so these are whiskeys that you kind of come by here and there depending on how much you get access to them and you know how many brokers give you fun samples to play with.
Exactly.
But it was almost like instant nostalgia for me when I put my nose in this glass.
So just when you started talking, I put my nose in my glass and I closed my eyes and I sat back a little bit. It smelled like Scottish Christmas from my youth.
Yeah.
And then when you finish talking, you say nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
Exactly correct. Exactly.
And Christmas is right there too. I mean, that could be anybody's Christmas, I think. That was definitely.
We do have another note within this, and this is a note that I've learned from doing tasting panels with Joshua, is pickled walnuts.
There is a jar of pickled walnuts sitting in my Amazon cart after hearing him talk about that the last time. Because I'm like, all right, I need to.
Thanks to Joshua.
Yeah.
and it's funny. So I still haven't bought pickled walnuts. I still haven't eaten pickled walnuts. But I now identify pickled walnuts because of my tastings with Joshua.
Sure.
And I'm kind of like, when I put this across the palate, I'm like, that's pickled walnuts.
Because it's what, a little sweet and a little savory kind of thing is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and there's a heaviness to it. There's a richness, but then there's this nuttiness to it. But it's a soft nuttiness. It's not a toasted nuttiness, you know. And you know, almost like an older Ben Nevis. There's a little bit of dank going across the middle or the back of the palate. You know, that can speak to walnut, pickled walnut. Oh yeah. Have you stuck your nose back in the 8? Oh boy, candy necklaces when you put your nose back into the 8.
Yeah, that's just like aerosolized sugar.
Which for me again is back to my youth. They would have come out of a 10-pence mix-up. You know, when you went to the local corner store and put over your 10 pence and got 10 different little penny candies. That was a 10-pence mix-up for us. And you would invariably get either a fruit salad candy, or you would get one of those little candy necklaces or candy watch.
I don't know if it's the same. I've heard you guys use candy necklace a lot. And the one that I've always gone to, and it may be the same base material that they're made out of, but circus peanuts. Which I don't know if you've had. My wife from Japan has no idea what circus peanuts are because it's this terrible American marshmallow little candy that, but I think it's in that same like candy necklace. It's that kind of processed sugar, but light and airy sort of thing.
Yeah. For me, when you talk about, you know, kind of aerosolized, I often talk about weaponized. For me, it's like weaponized confectioner's sugar.
Sure.
that real light powdery confectioner's sugar. But if you could take that and like concentrate it in some way, it's like that much, which would be just like the candy you would give to a kid.
Sure. Yeah, and then you go back to the sherry again, and this. I mean, you just see you can definitely see the effects of age when you go back to the 30-year-old, how everything is kind of, you know, it's the rocks that have been on the riverbed for, you know, thousands of years kind of thing. Everything is just kind of there. And there's even, I mean, they're more on the palate, I think, is where I see the Aultmore in this, but there are similarities here, despite totally different casts, totally different ages. Alcohol-wise, you're a little higher on the 8, but by like 3%, 4% kind of thing. So you're
That's
still
high for a 30-year-old, right?
Yeah, for a 30-year-old.
Again, what were they filling it at?
Man. But yeah, Christmas. There was one point, because I found the we'll talk about when we get to the root vor, but I was almost trying to figure out holidays to attach to all of these, and this was definitely Christmas, and Ruud Vor was definitely Halloween.
Okay. Oh, fun.
Yeah.
I will circle back on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, it's kind of like, okay, we have an 8-year-old Aultmore and we have a 30-year-old Aultmore. Which one of them is more Aultmore? And to me, it's an incredibly difficult question to ask. It's like asking about the platonic ideal of a distillery product, right? Like they're both the real Aultmore. This one is just 30 in sherry, and that one's 8 in bourbon.
Right. I mean, the 8-year-old would be closer to the 12, I think, and the 30 is closer to the older ones that they tend to have a little more sherry on. Yeah. But that's what I was so happy about with this one when I finally got it. And it was partly looking at the color and being like, okay, it's 30 years old, but I can still see through it. It's not pink. It's dark brown with some reddish hues. And then you drink it and there's still Aultmore there. There's still that like little dancing tingle. It's Aultmore. I've always gotten this almost like, and it's more of a textural note than a tasting note, but like pop rocks almost.
Oh yeah.
Especially on the 12-year-old, and I'm definitely getting that on the 8, but it's still here in the 30, which as soon as I tasted that, I was like, oh, thank God it's still there.
Yeah, Joshua talks about that as an effervescence.
Yeah, that's a great
or an excitability.
Yeah.
If he finds it being excited on the tongue, it's that type of pop rocks that you're talking about.
Yeah. The other thing that I've gotten that from is some of the really, really heavily peated stuff kind of starts dancing like that in a very different way, obviously, totally different flavors. But even some of the like the Ardbeg supernovas and that kind of thing, like I get this dancing kind of thing that goes along with it. So
yeah,
very
I think you're making perfect sense.
But man, so yeah, that's
then you get that. It's almost on the Aultmore 30. It's almost like as you sit of a morning drinking coffee, and you just get that layering of dryness and that layering of pleasing bitterness. Oh, man. You've got the layering of the oak and the sherry oak on the palate. Even the roof, you can tell where my tongue is. Even the roof of my mouth is drying out a little bit. The underside of my tongue and the sides internally are drying out as well.
Yeah, but also in very good balance, because there's plenty of older whiskeys where it's like, that's all you're getting kind of thing. But this is
that's the licking the stick variety.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all, I mean, that's part of what's so neat about going back and forth between the two of these. And I think we got a decent pile of both of these, so you guys can do this. But this has that like dry and the coffee note I didn't even kind of pick up on, or at least the sensation of it. But that's totally there. And then you go back to the 8 and the sweetness just flies right out at you then. And it's, there's part of me that doesn't want to drink these any other way than like back and forth next to each other.
And that was the thing with the 2 Clynlish that we put out, and the same thing with the 2 Lechig, is once you put them side by side, you're like, this is how to drink them. This is the way forward. Yeah. Like you want one to be sherry and one to be bourbon. You want one to be older, one to be younger. Yeah. You know, the 13 and the 15 on the Lechigs was really a chance to show what happens even within a similar age range when you bounce between different cask maturations. Yeah. So, it's been funny. It's something we've had the opportunity to do. It's not something we ever planned to do, but when it faced us, we knew to take advantage of it. I have no idea if we'll have a chance to do this in the 7th release or the 8th release. No. It'll just be keeping our options open. But the feedback that we've had from people on it has been tremendous, and kind of makes us proud that we did something a little different from what you would see on a normal retail outturn from an independent bottler.
Yeah, it's not something I've heard of happening before. I feel like almost most of the time, independent bottlers may go out of their way not to have the same distillery in, a contiguous release kind of thing like that.
Well, that just sounds like why Jason and Joshua would do the opposite. That just sounds like the perfect reason. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for Thanks for inviting that comparison that I may have led the witness on. Another thing on the pricing actually is, as we talked about earlier, when you're getting to those kind of higher numbers, here we have a 30-year-old Aultmore that we have done our very, very, very best to put on shelves for an approachable price. Yeah. And I really hope that for a 30-year-old and first fill sherry, you've got good age, you've got good sherry presence, and we're coming out, you'll know your shelf price better than I do.
Yeah. I mean, we're in New York, so I like to gouge people at like $600 on this, but no,
that doesn't sound like
this we tried to do as close to MSRP as we could manage on these. So this is, I think, right at like $375. And the other, we have a 30-year-old Glenglassaugh, which is phenomenal whiskey too. If I could have both, I'd be thrilled. But that's, $100 more, somewhere in there, like $75 more, somewhere in that ballpark. So, and that was part of why I brought that into the store, was because it was one of the best deals in a 30-year-old whiskey that you could find. So for this at Cask Strength, 30-year-old Aultmore is pretty nuts to get at that price.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We try to make buying decisions easy for people. And so if they can look at a 375 30-year-old first fill sherry that also has the Aultmore presence going on, then we've done our job. Yeah. That's, we're not here to rip the arse out of it. We want people drinking good whiskey. If it says Single Cask Nation on it, all the better.
Yeah. No, this is delightful.